This is Chapter 5, Pillar 1, Mindset. In the first pillar of practice, we cultivate a mindset that is conducive to trustworthy intuitive experience. As we've explored, there are so many different ways to conceive of intuition, what it is, where it comes from, and how it works. Intuitive experience is complex. The reason this matters is because what you believe about intuition informs how you relate to it. So, before we get to the skills of intuition development, the skills of perceiving and interpreting intuitive experience, we lay a foundation of mindset. In this pillar, we unpack our beliefs in and our stories about intuition. We dig into why intuition is still subject to taboos and misunderstanding. We look into elements that cause us to reject and shut down intuitive experience in ourselves and consider how certain beliefs and ideas act as a cloudy filter that disengages us from being in the intuitive mode and prevents us from even recognizing intuitive experiences when they happen. One reason shifting your mindset matters so much is that with an orientation to valuing intuitive experience, you simply start to recognize it happening more often. Typically, attunement to subtle and inner experience is driven by a willingness to experience these things. Even just recognizing the possibility of intuitive experience prepares a person to experience more of it. In other words, when we intentionally align ourselves with the possibility of intuitive function, our access to intuition tends to improve. So, to become more intuitive, we have to believe that intuition is both possible and valuable. Mindset primes our receptivity. We prepare our expectations deliberately so that over time, we're more likely to receive more intuitive information. Simply believing or trusting that you can have valuable intuitive experiences goes a long way towards improving your intuition, even if you do nothing else. By letting yourself entertain the idea that you might perceive intuitive information anytime, a recursive positive feedback loop develops. By expecting it, you make the experience more likely. Then, if we pay attention and act on intuitive hits, our relationship with intuition gets even better. This feedback loop is fueled by trust and self awareness. So, this is the first pillar for cultivating intuition, developing a mindset comprised of a willingness to accept that all kinds of intuitive experience is available and a curiosity about how it shows up for you. By thinking about the framework that lets intuition make sense on its own terms, you are engaging in mindset practice. And look at that. By reading this book, your mindset practice has already begun. Metaphysical choices. Mindset is a buzzy word. Generally, it means our attitudes and orientations towards a topic. Mindset is our way of thinking, our beliefs, and our ideas, and it's connected to cognition, attitudes, values, and frame of mind. Mindset is similar to worldview, a fundamental set of beliefs, values, assumptions, and ideas about the world. Most often, mindsets are unconscious. They're internalized, so they remain hidden even from ourselves. But our thoughts and minds habits can change, which is pretty noteworthy because we need our minds on board when we want to become better attuned to intuitive experience. Whether we're aware of it or not, usually not, in every moment we make metaphysical choices. These are assumptions we make about the world and the nature of reality that in turn structure what we think of as real and even of what is possible. Metaphysical choices are beliefs we take for granted, and though they're usually not conscious, they frame what we think of as real, normal, and good. So, this pillar has implications beyond intuition and intuitive experience. As we examine what we believe about intuition, we also explore what we believe about ourselves, who we are, and what we're doing here, incarnate and alive on Earth. We explore the nature of truth and reality and consciousness. Big questions, right? And although I say metaphysical choice, it's not like we can just tell ourselves to believe otherwise and that's that. it can be incredibly difficult to parse out alternatives to the ways of knowing and being that we grew up with. We have to work to change our feelings about our beliefs. We have to work to embody them. We have to repattern how we relate to reality. But why do we even need to develop a particular mindset about intuition? If intuition is a birthright connected to instinct and something we're born with already, shouldn't it be easy or obvious? Let's start there. A couple summers back, I met a neighbor and we got to chatting. She asked what I do, and I told her that I study and write about intuition, what it is, and why that matters. Well, she had such an interesting response. Her body kind of stiffened. She stood up straighter as she told me repeatedly, defensively, I could practically see the hackles, that she believes in, heck, is all for gut feelings. But she draws a line at intuition. In a tone I recognized from some of my former academic colleagues, she adamantly demanded that I hear her on this point. There's no such thing, it's not possible. She meant psychic intuition and energetic sensitivity. And you know what? For her, she might be right. She might live her whole life and never experience transpersonal intuition. Even if it came in like a storm and dropped a golf ball sized chunk of hail on her head, she would probably have all kinds of rationalizations for it rather than acknowledge intuitive experience. Now, you'll notice that my neighbor was okay with gut feelings. She was willing to allow for the existence of intuition as long as there was a material, rational explanation. That's fine if it works for her, but it's unfortunate because, as we know, limiting what counts as intuition to whatever can be explained rationally creates a shallow, simplistic understanding of how it works. Ultimately, rational explanations don't count for intuition on its own terms. They exclude intuitive experiences not based on prior experience or another recognizable source, which many of the common, yet admittedly uncanny experiences are not. Experiences like suddenly realizing you should probably take a different route home today, or getting a call from a long lost friend you've just been thinking about. Something is lost by not recognizing that intuition is a relationship that we can have with ourselves and with information carried along vibrations that we somehow perceive and interpret to make sense of. It denies a whole range of psychic and transpersonal experience. Mindset matters because, piled on top of innate intuitive knowing, there are layers of cultural conditioning that teach us over and over again how impossible it is that we can know. We're taught that only certain authorities have the right to know: teachers, priests, parents. And while, yes, there are things experts know better than us, that's not everything. There's the matter of being able to trust what we know ourselves from within through the connection each of us have with our own innate wisdom and with transpersonal consciousness. It's about being experts in our own experience and coming at that from a critical, educated lens, meaning we are educated in our own stuff and critical of the ways our stuff is constructed by outside forces. There's the need to be willing to see our context with receptive curiosity rather than preconceived notions. Perhaps most importantly, mindset matters because it shapes the way our consciousness filters our thoughts and experiences. When we actively acknowledge the possibility for intuitive experience, we are much more likely to experience that possibility. Because to some extent, whether we register intuitive hits at all depends on what we think they are. For example, if you have a tingling sensation in your gut, do you know that's how your intuition communicates? Or do you just chalk it up to indigestion? When we actively acknowledge the possibility for intuitive experience, we are much more likely to recognize that possibility. I was talking to my aunt about my research one day and describing different kinds of intuitive experience. When I got to synchronicity, where you think of someone out of the blue and then a while later you take a different than usual route home and there that person is, her eyes lit up with recognition. Oh, yeah, I know that, she said, remembering a time when that exact thing happened to her. I guess I didn't know that's a thing. She had had that experience, but had no way to categorize what it was, so she forgot about it until our conversation. In 2001, more than half of the US population reported having psychic experiences. That's a lot of people. So why the heck do I still encounter deniers? Maybe you're one of them. Or maybe you're not outright denying the possibility of intuitive experiences, but you're skeptical. Herein lies the work of the mindset pillar. Without this preparatory practice, we might not recognize intuition when it arises, or we might dismiss psychic awareness as something else entirely. Unless we're prepared to consider that psychic intuitive experiences are real and possible, we might overlook them, even as they're happening. Mindset isn't simply just about whether intuition exists or not, since what we believe about intuition informs how and even if we experience it. We'd best wade through our ideas to figure out what we believe about intuition. Without a guiding framework or a notion of its source, it's easy to project whatever you believe onto what intuition is and where it's from. Importantly, here, what we believe about intuition informs what we do to help cultivate it. For example, if we believe intuition to be the voices of guides or angels of the biblical or library variety, we will want to deepen our relationship to those beings. If we believe intuition is made possible by expertise, then we'd go about gaining expertise. Or if you agree with me that intuition is a function of resonance and connection facilitated by a receptive, self aware consciousness, you would take up the path of practice that I'm outlining here. The mindset for cultivating intuition concerns how we understand ourselves as conscious beings in relation to consciousness itself. In chapter 3, we explored how intuition makes sense on its own terms within a quantum logic of resonance and connection. If intuitive experience works in the ways I've suggested, what does that mean for our understanding of ourselves or for the way consciousness works in general? For example, some people say that intuition arises from a subconscious aspect of the psyche. So, how we conceptualize the psyche matters to how we relate to intuition. We all carry inherited beliefs about the self and the psyche. From the beginnings of the psychoanalytic traditions of the 19th century, the psyche has been portrayed as a dark, foreboding place that we don't really want to know too much about. It's scary. We don't tend to bother with it unless it bothers us, at which point we might seek out a psychoanalyst or psychiatrist to help us uncover whatever is misaligned or unwell about this part of ourselves. In general, when we hear too much from the subconscious, we tend to pathologize these experiences rather than treat them as opportunities for self awareness and growth. That's a mindset that might lead us to pathologize intuitive experience too, framing it as freaky, alarming, or even unwelcome, rather than as a resource for potential wisdom and understanding. And with the feedback loop intuition relies on for affirmation, this internalized attitude communicates to the intuitive function that it should retreat. We have made it clear that it's not welcome, and often the result is it leaves us alone. See why intuition makes people like my neighbor so damn defensive? Where knowledge comes from. Within the mindset pillar, we check in with our beliefs about consciousness, knowledge, and about truth itself. To let intuition make sense, we need to consider what counts as knowledge? How do we come to know something? These are deep philosophical orientations that lay the groundwork for how we relate to intuition in general and to our own intuitive experience. So much of intuitive experience, things like precognition and telepathy, have for so long been considered literally impossible, according to a knowledge framework that only trusts objective material rationality as the valid way to know anything. Throw in a long-standing taboo against intuition and the unseen world, and it can feel like human nature to cast doubt first instead of trust. After all, doubt is a foundation of the scientific paradigm and of the analytic mode. And this goes beyond the issue of trusting ourselves. Of course it does, because another foundation of the rational approach is that knowledge must be objective. But objectivity requires us to hold our subjectivity at bay, meaning we can never be fully invested or immersed in anything. Over time, this effort can cause anxiety and stress that interfere with the receptivity required of intuition, because intuition thrives with a mindset of trust, not doubt. Starting from a default of doubt and objectivity prevents us from being present to the moment, leading to a state of alienation. I use the word alienation deliberately here to remind us that this disconnection from intuitive experience is not a personal failing, but a result of internalized socialization and cultural factors. Our whole collective way of being disavows intuitive knowing, constrained by barriers that the capitalist materialist mindset has constructed against knowing what we are experiencing. When we don't recognize ourselves to be part of the web of life, our relationship with intuition suffers. We become estranged from our own bodies and emotions and from an appreciation for the sentience that exists beyond the human species. While some of the internalized doubt and skepticism may be well founded and even useful, much of it is excessive, having become habit. And habits, as we know, become unconscious, reliant on well worn neural pathways rather than intention. So, how do we respond to inner knowing through this veil of disconnection and deadening of the world? How can we understand ourselves and the world beyond the lens of dualist, me, not me, inner, outer, good, bad, and finite, scarcity of time, space, knowledge, and potential, values? Well, we unpack the foundations that inform our way of thinking about intuition. Through the mindset pillar, we practice cultivating a more expansive worldview by becoming aware of the boundaries of our perception and hence the limitations of our knowledge. We grow beyond or transcend them. Doing inner work that helps us recognize our beliefs and assumptions about what intuition is prepares us for a different way of seeing and sensing. Through the work of the mindset pillar, we shift our orientation to intuitive experience, helping us become more comfortable, familiar, and confident. Rather than shut down possibility and potential, this opens a door to opportunity for making different metaphysical choices.